Hi there, and welcome to CoalTech's CoalTalk, where we speak to our research partners to find out what they're working on and how the work that they're doing is impacting the future of the coal sector. And today I am really excited to introduce one of our research partners from the University of the Witwatersrand, Miss Matsobane Nong. Matsubane, good afternoon to you. How are you? Who is Matsobane Nong?
Thank you so much, Aburengwi. So I'm a lecturer at WITS and I teach drilling and blasting to second year students. And I also teach some short courses, for our, industry participants and delegates. That's really who I am on the professional side. I enjoy research, applied research. And I've been working on a couple of other researches in the past few years. So that's really who I am on the professional side.
All right, I'm sure we'll unpack that in a bit more detail. Of all the things that you could have chosen to do in the world, why mining? How did you end up in the mining's domain?
Mining hasn't always been the plan. So when I finished matric, and as you know, for most of us, from rural areas, our parents want us to be doctors. So initially I wanted to be a doctor mainly because, my family was like, "Oh, you're so smart enough. You can be a doctor." So I came to Wits and my sister was like, "You know what, girl? You don't look like you've decided or you're really clear on what you want to do." So, the advice was just do a general BSc and let's see where it could land you in the next year. So what then happened was when I spent my year at Wits in the general BSc, I got to, interact with mining students. And as I was interacting with mining students, I realized that, mining seems to be a very interesting career that I could pursue. And on top of that, I was actually very, very good with physics. And having seen that a lot of mining students have sponsorship, I thought, I could also be one of those with sponsorship. And I found myself, the following year actually enrolling for mining and then graduating, then going to work in the mines.
Okay. It is interesting the way you framed it. That, as you know, when you grow up in the villages, there are sort of certain hopes and dreams that parents have. But as young people, I suppose we also have our own paths to follow. In your case, that seems to have been mining. Today, you are a lecturer at VETS, as you mentioned, but you're also busy with your studies, pursuing a PhD. From time to time, I get asked to like deliver a guest lecture. It's like 45 minutes once a year. It is so exhausting. And when it comes around, I don't look forward to it because of how much work goes into preparing for such. You do this every single day. How do you do it? And what's a typical week in the life of Matsubane like?
It's very interesting that you bring, the issue of, you having that lecture, the preparation. Preparation is a lot. And not only preparation, there's marking for us lecturers. And I think most lecturers don't that task. But, to just explain to you how I actually get to do all of that. When I was in the mines, I went into the mines. I enjoyed my time at the mine, but there was an opportunity to come back to Wits to, do pursue a master's. And I've always been someone who enjoys teaching. When I was at the mines, I was tutoring somewhere. When I was in high school, I was teaching people something. When I was an undergraduate student, people would tell you, Matsobane is always tutoring. I was that girl. So when I got the opportunity to come to WITS, for me, it was, you know what? I've always been a teacher. So let me take this opportunity because it's really where it seems the universe is directing me to. So in terms of, lecture preparations and all of that, yes, they take so much of your time, but there's just something about, when you teach a student in second year and you then see them graduate after, in my case would be 3 years, or, in their fourth year. And that is really, it gives the satisfaction that you've actually done something. I think for me, this is the purpose. This is my purpose, in life, to impart knowledge to the next generation of, the future of South Africa. And if you look at what I do during the week, first it starts with, of course, the preparation, which, starts actually on a Sunday if I'm teaching on a Monday, and then the Tuesday, and then there's research that I do on the Wednesday and the Thursday, more or less. There's also, committees that we do as a university, because not only is, lecturing about teaching, there's research aspect to it, as you've mentioned, and we'll talk about it. But there's also the side where, we need to give back to the community. So that could be, participating in committees in the university. For example, I chair the Public Relations and Marketing Committee, and that involves, going out there and, telling people about, the school or the university. And one way that I do it personally, and I love it, it's, going to schools and talking about a career in mining. And so that happens, during the week. And in most cases, it actually also goes to the weekend, where on Saturdays, you have to go to these schools when you are being invited, to talk about a career in mining. And on some days, which would be in most cases, since starting my PhD and collecting data, would be to, go on site, because my project is on site. I have to go on site. So I do that every Friday in the morning, get up in the morning, drive to Wheatbank to do my observations. So that's essentially how my week looks like, 5 days plus the 2 days sometimes.
I must say it's the first time that I'm sort of getting a full appreciation that it's more than just the lecturing, the preparation, the marking, which I assume is not fun at all. But I have met people who say they really enjoy doing so. Matsobane, maybe let's switch a bit and talk about the work that brought you into the Coaltech world, the research topic that you decided on. What led you to focus on this particular topic? And if you don't mind, just explaining to our viewers, the audience, what you're working on, what led you into that, and then we'll later go into what some of the early findings have been.
Just to, simplify what I'm doing. The topic is really just about finding a criteria. So a criteria on vibrations that are induced by blasting, in South Africa. What led me to have this, to decide on working on this project is because I did mention that I teach, industry participants and delegates for a short course, at WITS. So the short course is on drilling and blasting. And, some of the things that we talk about is, sustainable mining practices. We talk about designing, blasts. We talk about the impacts of, blasting. So, and I get a lot of students, experienced students. So we are talking about people that have been in the industry for 10 years, for 15 years, some engineers as well. And, in most cases, I found myself having, discussions with my students about how to best, design a blast such that you minimize, the vibrations. And so this one time, I then got a request from it's a government, I think, mining engineer specialist from East Africa. I don't quite remember, the country that the specific person comes from, but they sent a request, to ask what are we using in South Africa as, as a criteria for blasting. And at the time, I just, gave the value and say, oh, this is what we are using. This is what the mines, do. And I also shared some research. And the research I shared was actually done in the US. And they wanted to understand where, those values actually come from. And With that, I was actually forced to go into, you know, to research to understand where exactly the values that I've given to the mining engineer, come from. And that's when I realized that South Africa doesn't actually, or Africa, the entire continent, doesn't actually have criteria on, vibrations as it pertains to mining. And I decided, because at the time as well, I was, trying to find a research topic, I decided this is really what I need to do. Considering what I've also seen in the industry, and yeah, that's how I came about, doing this study, the need in South Africa and in Africa as a continent.
It's always so fascinating when you learn about how, particularly PhD students, arrive at a particular topic and say, for the next 3, maybe 5 years, this is what I'm choosing to do. In your case, to focus on what happens when that blast goes off at the mine, which then brings us to the next question, Matsubane. What in fact happens? So you've got these communities, and let's take it, maybe narrow the question more to the coal mining sector. You've got communities that typically surround, whether it's an open pit mine or an underground mine. They are a certain distance away from the operation. If you take us into an open cast type environment, what typically happens when a blast goes off, from the perspective of the community, but also from the perspective of the mine itself?
Okay, so I'm gonna start, from zero. As a lecturer, I'd like to teach from the beginning. So what happens is that there's a design that is made, and there are people that actually execute the design. So that means that entails holes that are drilled into the ground at a particular bedding and spacing. There's explosives that are charged in the holes, to a particular charge length, the amount of explosives that are in the hole. And at some point, these explosives are then, detonated. The initiators are initiated, and the explosive then detonates. So we are talking about, sometimes hundreds, 400, 500. There's a lot of holes that could actually, that are detonated. Not to say these explosives, these holes, the explosives in the holes go off at the same time, but there's a particular timing to it that is used. Now, when the explosives, detonate, what happens is that detonation of the explosive releases a very high, amount of energy. And we see this energy, first because the rock is broken. But what we don't see, is actually, the air overpressure, which we feel. And we also feel the vibrations in the ground. So, from the mine site, we detonate the explosive. We get very high energy because we want to break the rock. But that energy that is released from the explosives not only breaks the rock, it also causes other things. And these other things are your air blast, your air overpressure. We also have, vibrations. Now, from the community side, these vibrations are essentially, the ground moving. So the ground, shakes as this wave of, powerful energy moves from the blast site to whatever. So when these waves interact, or they come into contact with, say, you've got a structure that is on top of a ground. When this ground shakes, of course, it shakes whatever structure is on top of it. And when that shaking happens, as a person within the house, I feel the vibration, I hear the noise, the air blast is just a pressure wave. And for me, that is problematic. And that's really happens, from the community side. We feel the vibrations, we feel the air blast, we hear it, the noise, and the minds, get their fragmentation, which is really why they are blasting. And they blast, based on certain rules. So a criteria. So they will design their blast to ensure that the vibration level, the shaking, does not exceed a certain number. That's what they do all the time. Um, yeah, and the communities don't actually know about those numbers. So that's actually what happens on both sides.
Why can't we just stick to sort of the formula that we've used from the 1980s that we imported from the US? It seems to have served this sector fairly well. Why can't we just carry on doing that? Why do you think we need to localize the process and have our own calculations here?
The criteria that you talk about is one that was developed in the US, of course, in the 1980s. So a lot of mines in South Africa use that, yes. There was a study that the Mine Health and Safety Council did, and it did establish that, majority of South African mines actually use that criteria. Me doing this research, I'm not saying the American standard is wrong. No, that's not what we're saying. What I'm saying, however, is that if you look at research that has been done, you realize that weather, for example, has an impact, on how, structures behave. Um, so if you look at, also how the structures are built in the US, you will notice that it's quite different from how we built our structures in South Africa. And of course, if we are building structures different, it could also mean that the response is also different. And unless we do the study, we won't know if indeed it's different. Um, we've got we build our houses, using bricks, mortar. The US, they use some boards, I think, and in some cases they do add, some bricks here and there. But really, how we built our structures in South Africa and how they built their structures is quite different. Weather has a huge impact as well. It has been proven. Some studies have been done in India, in Australia, and so it would be very important for us to understand how our own structures, how we built structures, actually respond to the vibrations.
All right, so it's part of your proposal or the proposal that you sent to the Coaltech Research Association. Part of your methodology involves actually building these structures. Why did you have to go as far as building your own structures, which are costly? Why could you not just use the existing houses within these mining communities?
You know, when you build, you know, own structure for the purpose of the study, you are able to understand, the responses because you know what you've put in, right? How you've built the structure. And, when you do the analysis, you are able to put things in perspective. But more than that, the important part about it is that um, many houses in mining communities have been in existence, for a long time. I don't know how exactly they were built. And so when I assess, their response, I won't necessarily know, exactly how, the structure. I won't be able to analyze the response because I don't really know how it was, built to start with. Now, when I built the structure, close to a mine, what we were able to do is we were able to decide, what kind of bricks we're using, what the mixture that we're using for the structures, what do we put on the floor, all these variables, having looked at, how South Africans built their homes, and we are able to control exactly what goes into the structure so that when we analyze later after collecting as much information as we've collected, we are able to say, look, we've got these responses because, potentially it's as a result of how, this structure was built. And I must say that for the structures that we built, it's actually two structures and they are built with different materials. And, we are also able to compare, the two structures to say, one that was built in this manner responded, to the same blast in this manner, and the other responded in this way. So we are then able to make, comparable comparisons so that we get, insights and, develop a criteria that works for South Africa, or even better, just understand how, structures generally just respond to, to blasting and overpressure. I don't know if I've mentioned, but we also have weather stations, strain gauges, humidity loggers, sorry. And, we'd be able to see how all of these actually impact on our structures.
And are you seeing any impact at the moment? You've been monitoring, I think, for must be close to a year, I assume. Are you seeing anything different?
So it's been 13 months since we started monitoring. We started on the 31st or 30th of June, rather, 30th of June 2025, and we are still monitoring to date. Have I seen differences? Yes, in terms of, crack formation, crack extension. Yes, we have seen there are cracks in the structure. What else have I seen? It's the difference in how the two structures respond. Currently I can't say, if the cracks are as a result of blasting, because we have to first say, okay, this is how, we have, these, weather information. And on this particular days, we blasted. And what are we seeing? With the strain gauges, we are able to see, when we have a blast, how are the walls moving? And with the crack gauges, we are able to see if there was a blast, are we seeing an extension of the crack? And what actually happens after that blast? Is it staying, at that extended length, or is it going back? And so with the weather, we are then able to see, are we seeing these extensions when we have a blast, or are we seeing these extensions, you know, even when there's no blast? So that's really, what we are seeing. The cracks are there. Are they structural? Structural meaning, do they, is it cracks that could, result in the house, failing at this stage? No.
As you're talking, I'm thinking I've seen a fair share of cracked houses in my life, whether it's in urban environments or villages. And I've always assumed that if your building material is not good enough or of a high enough quality, it is likely that your structure will develop some cracks. In the city, I'm sure there are multiple reasons that lead to this formation of cracks. How do we then know that the cracks that you are monitoring are indeed caused by these vibrations from the mines, considering that houses everywhere do crack, whether it's within mining communities or some kilometers away from the mines?
Um, like I've mentioned, so we like I've mentioned, we monitoring. I'm saying we because there's a number of service providers as well that are assisting. So what is happening is that with the weather stations, with the strain gauges, with the crack gauges, we are continuously monitoring. So that means right now, as we speak, the instruments are actually taking readings. So the mine doesn't blast every day. We know exactly at what time, the mine has blasted. So we are able to say the mine blasted, today at 2 minutes past 2, for example. And we are then, going to say at the time that the mine blasted, because we've got these crack gauges, across, the pre-existing cracks or the cracks that formed in the past. So we will then look at those cracks and say, when we had that blast at 2 minutes past 2, did we experience an extension of the crack? Any change in the size? Did it, elongate? What actually happened? And I mean, if we then see that when we had a blast, we had that extension, then we could say, the blast is a potential reason why we had that extension. But if we then see a crack extension, because as I've mentioned, we are monitoring this on a 24-hour basis. If we then see crack extension at, say, 1 a.m., the mine where this test structures are, they don't blast at 1 a.m. So if we see the crack extension at 1 a.m., what we are going to then do is to say, you know, what was what was happening at the time? What changes, were there? So there we would look at the humidity, we look at the temperature. Was it maybe too cold or was it maybe too hot? And you'd be able to say if there was a crack extension, during a blast, it's most likely that it was the blast. But in instances where there was a crack extension, but there was no blast, you really cannot say it was, the blast. So that's, essentially how we are going to do it. There's a lot of data that's coming out of this. So we would be able to, correlate most of this, results with other data that we are collecting in the study.
I do know, having spent at least 2 decades of my life in the mines, that there are many, many reasons why community members feel aggrieved, whether it's dust pollution or whether it's water pollution, noise, etc. And the one issue that always comes up is, hey, you guys are blasting, we suffering because our houses are cracking. So from your point of view, do you see the outcome of the work that you're doing helping at least to um, resolve, not particularly resolve, but to help in a conversation between the mine and the community, at least be better informed or not? Do you see this as purely an academic exercise, or are there opportunities where the dialogue between the two parties could be improved?
I I think that this, it's applied research. So it's not purely academic. I think more than anything is information, it's research that will greatly assist the industry. If we are to be frank, the mines don't, cannot say they are blasting are indeed, um, you know, cracking people's houses. The communities also, cannot 100% say that the mine is damaging their houses. And really it's because at this stage, today as we sit here, nobody really knows if indeed, in South Africa, the blasts are damaging, people's homes. So how I see this research is we are generating a lot of data. My aim is, to come up with a criteria, but the data that is collected is so much that more than, just developing a criteria, it can help us understand, other aspects of drilling and blasting. I'm thinking about, the issue of, the amount of explosives that are detonating at a time. We could understand how, energy, that is the vibrations, the waves are actually, generated, or rather how they are, propagating. Propagation is the word I'm looking for. They are propagating from the point of detonation to, a point, to a house, or to any other, place. And what that assists us in doing is that in estimating, so when the mine estimates, before they actually execute on their designs, they actually estimate how much, vibrations are expected at, say, 500 meters, say 1,000 meters from where they are blasting. So it's an estimate. And so with this research, information that comes, is also understanding that propagation. And when we understand the propagation, then we'd be able to say, based on this information that we've collected from the research, we are able to accurately, or maybe to like 90% confidence level, that our PPV after blasting will be 12 or would be 6 or would be 5. So the confidence levels of how we do things in drilling and blasting will definitely improve based on the data that we will collect from the study. So the study expands more than just developing a criteria. There's other things that can be, done from this study.
So Matsobane, PPV is?
Oh, sorry. So PPV is peak particle velocity. So in layman terms, it's essentially the level of vibration that you feel. So if we say, the PPV is 12 millimeters per second, we're essentially saying the vibrations, they are at a level of about 12. So that's essentially what it is.
We've spoken about the communities. We've spoken about the mine itself. What is it that you would like the regulator to do with the results of your study?
The regulator, is very important. The regulator is very important in the South African mining community. With the information, I would really like that, we use it to educate, both, from the mine side, because we still do have, some, drilling and blasting, professionals that don't actually, understand, vibrations. The regulator can assist in, disseminating this information, using the information to also inform, the, rules that they make, the regulations that they make as it pertains to peak particle velocity. So that is vibration. Currently, the regulator says we must, follow the USBM, your 12.7 millimeters per second. But, what I would really like is for them to, look at the study that has been done and, see if, from the study, regulations can be developed in such a way that it is informed by work that has been done, in on site, to assist, with understanding this issue.
Okay, no, that's fair. And if I am Mr. General Manager somewhere in Emalasheni, is there anything that you have found up to this point, 13 months into this study, that I can use today, or do I have to wait for your PhD thesis to be published?
Unfortunately, the general manager will have to wait because, and I didn't mention it at the beginning. So, I'm not just monitoring the structures, I'm monitoring the structures over time. And, the question is why, 12 months, why 13 months? And it's because of the seasons. I also want to understand what the impacts of the seasons are to the response of the structures. So currently, I mean, we are in, the tail end of data collection. We haven't, I haven't analyzed all the data, so I wouldn't want to share incomplete or uncooked data, with the industry. So yeah, I would have to wait, unfortunately.
All right, we will wait, and hopefully, once you have all your data, we can maybe leverage this new technology in the form of AI to get that PhD done in no time. Um, but I digress. Matsobane, maybe as we wrap up, I'm wondering if there are maybe any last words you want to leave. We started the conversation with how you got into mining. It's really an inspirational story for a young lady or a young man somewhere in some village, be it in Limpopo, Eastern Cape, it could be in Mozambique, listening to somebody who's gone through the process, has opted to go the academic route, and now they're in pursuit of their PhD. You having to engage with minors, but engage with them through the lens of science and engineering. I am wondering if there's maybe anything that we have not covered that you would like to say, whether it's to the research community or again to that 16-year-old listening, wondering what to do next with their life.
I think it would be twofold. From, the research side or the mining industry side, it would be there's so many, great ideas that are in academia. And, for these ideas, to come to life, it's really the industry to help us push it. And how can they assist us push it? Similar to the study that I'm doing, I believe that if it wasn't for Coaltech, to come to the party to say we value this research, if it wasn't for Tungela as well, being a co-founder of this study, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So many of the solutions that we need in the industry, are in academia, and they can only, we can only see something happening or some of these things being tested in the industry if the industry can come to party, support the research, and ensure that we actually get somewhere with the mining industry. We still have a long way, I mean, we've got so many minerals in South Africa, so we need to actually find better ways to mine. We need to find, better ways to communicate with the community, to build trust, between the mines and the communities. So it is through most of these issues can actually be solved, via, very good research that is conducted. And, for the 16-year-olds, being someone who really, really loves, going out there and talking about careers in mining, I would say to them that, there's a great future in mining in South Africa. We still have so many mines that would be developed. Even the current mines that are currently operating, there's lots of opportunities there. And, for us to get to, a position where we say that, our economy, is again standing on, mines. We need people to come to the party. I don't think 20 years ago I thought, I would participate in the mining industry, but here I am. Yeah, it feels like I'm just one person at a corner somewhere, but collectively, together we can do a lot. So there is a future in mining. And for us to advance, mining, we need to come in, study what we can in mining, come up with great ideas, and ensure that we build this industry of ours into something, very big that would ensure that our economy prospers, now and into the future. So yeah.
Right, you've been listening to CoalTalk. If you're on YouTube, we've been talking to Miss Matsobane Nong, who's on her way to hopefully writing and publishing that PhD thesis, sponsored, as she mentioned, or co-sponsored by Tungela and the Coaltech Research Association. I've really enjoyed deep diving into the science of, suppose, blast engineering and what that means for the communities, but also what it means from the perspective of the mine itself. Ms. Matsobane Nong, it's been a pleasure listening to not only your story, but unpacking the science. We cannot wait to see the project coming to hopefully a good completion with solid findings that the industry can take forward, that the regulator can incorporate into their own regulations so that we can move this industry forward. With that, I am Abu Rengui and I'm with the Coaltech Research Association. Ms. Nong, thank you for your time. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.